This is a story of how I wanted to do something good for the car, and in return I got a problem of such massive proportions that I've been dealing with its consequences even half a year later. And the worst part is that it's entirely my fault. So basically I have this goober, it's a first generation Renault Twingo, and I have done a whole heap of things to this car already, with the goal to make it a fun-sized, quirky and reliable daily driver. Our story begins when I was in the process of getting it ready for the tech inspection, and on my to-do list was also to remake some rusted brake lines, which was necessary for the car to pass. But I wanted to do a bit more, do some preventative measures. Since the car is a later model, the body itself is rust-wise in pretty good condition. But the rust managed to creep its way onto the rear brake load compensating valve, its bracket and the exhaust mount. This was pretty much the only rust part of the car. It was all surface stuff, but if left unchecked it would slowly eat away at this little rascal. As I was already going to be taking everything off, I might as well fix these patches of rust. A perfect opportunity, I thought. A couple of weekends worth of work and I won't have to worry about it anymore. So, filled with hope and ambition, I started dismantling everything. The handbrake cables, the linkage for the load compensating valve, and of course the brake lines. Because I was smart about it, I emptied out the brake fluid from the system the night before to prevent it getting all over my hands.
There we go.
And while I was removing the shock absorbers, I stumbled upon another French design, like you do working on a French nugget like this. So that you don't have to provide counter torque to the nut while undoing the bolt, they have constructed a special piece of bent sheet metal which was meant to hold the nut in place. Which is absolutely not what it does. What it does is shit itself immediately after a little bit of torque is applied, it deforms and it makes it harder to grab the nut. And the icing on the cake is that they put a little plastic ring over the nut, like they're trying to say, no, bro, trust, it's good. No, it's absolutely not fucking good.
Is this so hard? Why make it easy if you can make it French?
After that, the rear axle could come out, though this was one of those things which is hard to do on your own. I somehow managed to do it, and I also removed the exhaust as well as the gas tank.
Oh, okay, it's still got some heft.
Then it was time to play one of my least favorite games, the try to remove old rusty brake line fittings without damaging the brake lines. Well, technically it didn't matter if I damaged them or not, but I tried not to so I could use them as stencils. With the valve off the car, I wanted to get as much rust off it as possible. I went at it with a wire wheel for a while, but because it is pretty small and has such an irregular shape, I decided to go about it in a different way. My dad has an ultrasonic cleaner and I've seen some videos showing how effective it can be at removing rust, so I wanted to give it a try. Plus the lever on the valve was stuck, so I thought that it would also help to release it. Unfortunately, it didn't work as well as I had hoped, so I had to go back to the tried and tested.
We're gonna pinch these together.
In the end, I managed to clean it up pretty well. But I still had to clean up all of these individual mechanism parts. This was a similar story. Tried to knock off the toughest flakes with a wire brush, chucked them into the ultrasonic cleaner. I used vinegar as a medium this time, which also didn't seem like it did much. Then I left them soaking in vinegar for a couple of days. In the meantime, I had to work on the bracket, which was in a pretty sorry condition.
This is just like Shrek. It has layers.
Then I also scrubbed the rust off of all the spots on the chassis, and I also had to fix one of the gas tank bolts which sheared off in the hole.
That was a welder. There we go, boys. Easy peasy. First try.
After a couple of days, I took the parts out of the vinegar and I neutralized them in some
Water and soda.
And because I just couldn't give up on the ultrasonic cleaner, I put the parts back in, thinking that the vinegar had loosened all the remaining rust and it's now just going to fall off. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Maybe I just need a stronger medium because I left them in for solid 20 minutes. Then it was time to paint everything. Like always, I coated everything in rust converter, then I used the epoxy primer and 2K acrylic paint combo. Though to save time, I just used spray cans to paint those various pieces of the mechanism, which was not a good idea in hindsight because the paint is very sensitive.
You can see here.
Then I also had to remake the brake lines, which is also a very tedious process. I like to take my time here and use these special pliers which help with bending, and they also make sure that you never kink the brake line. You also have to be focused while doing this because it can quickly happen that you make a rookie mistake of forgetting to put the fitting on the line.
Fuck me! Yo!
Cause then you just have to cut it, make a new flare, realize that it's now too short and then start from scratch.
There's a prank for you.
When all the lines were finished, they were connected, which meant I could start the reassembly. I had Jeff help me install the gas tank.
Sandcastle fell out.
We also reinstalled the exhaust and the rear axle, connected the last of the lines and bled the system. Or at least we tried to. Usually this would have been the point where I would be able to admire my work. That was not the case this time, because for some reason the rear brakes just weren't working.
Something's wrong.
After some fucking around, we uncovered that if you want the rear brakes to work, you have to have the valve connected to the axle with the mechanism. Or at least a zip tie. Unfortunate thing was that even after it was connected, the brake force just wasn't what it was supposed to be. So my dad suggested to take the valve apart and see if there is something obviously wrong with it on the inside. None of us had worked on anything like this before, and when we took it apart, all the pistons and seals looked okay, at least to us. So we cleaned everything and put it back together. After that, it didn't work any worse, nor any better, but we did figure out that if we put a little bit of preload on the spring in the mechanism by putting a big nut under it, we could make the valve produce a passable amount of brake force. At that point, I didn't have any more time to fiddle with this, I just needed the car to pass the tech inspection because of certain plans me and the boys had. More on that in the next video. But afterwards, this kept bothering me in the back of my mind. The valve that was currently on the car was probably broken, because before I put it into the ultrasonic cleaner, the brakes worked fine. And that was probably what did it in. Though some hydraulic valves are okay to be put into the ultrasonic bath, and I couldn't find any information that you can do that with this one. Granted, I also didn't find any that said it was okay. In any case, I needed a new brake valve. The problem was that the world of spare parts is slowly giving up on the first Twingo, as this valve is discontinued by OEM and aftermarket part suppliers. And it seemed like I was going to have to gamble on a used one, which is no doubt going to be rusty and stuck. But I was in luck as I found a listing on eBay for something very similar. I would imagine someone in Italy was trying to get rid of some old stock as they were selling that same valve but for a Renault Megane or Scenic. The mechanism looked to be different, but that didn't matter as I can reuse that. The valve itself though looked identical. Hoping it would fit, I bought it, and when it arrived I could confirm that it was indeed identical. Excited that my troubles were about to be over, I put it in the car. You might be wondering, why do I even bother with this valve? Wouldn't it be easier if I just bypassed it? Technically, I could do that, but it would make the car a bit unsafe in certain situations. Let me really quickly explain what its functions are. There are at least two. One is that it works as a proportioning valve, which means it lowers the brake pressure for the rear brakes, which are drums, and therefore require less brake pressure. Here is how much pressure the front and rear brakes need according to Renault. And the other is, it works as a brake load compensating valve, which under hard braking, when most of the weight transfers to the front and there is not a lot of weight on the rear wheels, it lowers the brake pressure of the rear brakes so that you don't lock up the rear, which probably wouldn't be the best with the Twingo's short wheelbase. That's why I decided to put some more effort in and have everything working perfectly. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet, as the lever on the new valve is a bit shorter. The valve looks like it works, but because there is not enough leverage, even if it's set to being open to the max, the brakes still don't provide enough brake force. But since both the valves are the same, with the lever being the only difference, I wanted to try switching the levers around. And because the pin on the new one wasn't rusty at all and it came out relatively easily after some hammering, it meant I was going to be able to do this. I scrubbed off all the remaining rust on the other side of the lever because I couldn't do it before and painted it. I also greased up the pin to give it a better chance at resisting rust, installed the valve on the bracket and the whole assembly in the car. I bled the brakes, hopefully for the last time, and then it was time to see if my sentence was lifted.
Let's hope this is the final time I need to work on this forever. Not in 2 or 3 years, not in 5 years, forever, no more.
The moment of truth. Oh! Oh, it works! Oh, it works! It works! Yeah!
And it looks like it indeed was. There appears to be some slight discrepancy between the right and the left side, but that is probably something with the drums, as it also happens when I pull the handbrake. This is not an emergency and it will be taken care of when we'll be getting ready for the next year's tech inspection. For now, the blue is in the best shape it has ever been in mechanically. I also replaced one of the outer CV joints, so it now should be in the best possible condition. But since I'm already an experienced nuggeteer, I know that this won't last long and I will just have to enjoy this blessing that was given to me. The reason I had to leave this brake situation half resolved and rush to pass the tech inspection will be revealed in the next video, and I think you're going to like what I've got cooking. For now, I would like to thank you for watching the video. If you want, you can leave a like on the video or subscribe to the channel. That's goodbye for now, and like always, I'd like to wish you a great rest of your day.